Nobunaga Oda, the Demon King, the most infamous historical figure in Japanese history. It is almost impossible to talk about the Sengoku period without at least bringing him up, and Samurai Warriors is no exception. So let's see what type of nuance Omega Force brought to this portrayal of this well-known historical figure. Nobunaga was somewhat of a rebel of his time. Even though he was a daimyo and descended from nobility, he never quite fit in with the mold of his society. Ever since the age of 2, he dressed outlandishly, he played with commoners, and adopted slang. And as he grew up, he developed an eccentric taste in humor, which largely affected how he interacted with other people. Many accounts on knowing Nobunaga has stated that he came off as a bit sarcastic and it was hard to tell whether or not he was joking or taking the situation seriously. And he had a habit of giving his retainers nicknames that ranged from endearing to insulting. This earned himself the nickname the Fool of Owari. But what really rubbed people the wrong way is how he treated his position as daimyo. He really didn't care what his title meant beyond his responsibilities. He would affiliate and befriend himself with individuals that daimyo at the time would never have done. For instance, he was very friendly and tolerant of foreign settlers, even though most of Japan, they were largely unwelcome. He was intrigued by their art, clothing, and advancements in society and understanding how the world works.
This king of Owari always spoke like a general, yet was very rude. He likes justice and benevolence and respects honor to the point of arrogance. He rarely listens to his subordinates and relies on his own skills. He treated me and countrymen respectfully, which is uncommon for a daimyo. He is very intelligent but disregards gods and Buddha and does not seem to believe in an afterlife.
Of course, he wasn't completely outlandish. He had some normal interests too, like dancing, Bon festivals, sumo wrestling, and Go, which he would later get a move named after him. And he was well known amongst his retainers for answering complaints with a sarcastic and aggravating
"Is that so?"
Nobunaga became the head of the Oda clan in 1551 when his father Nobuhide died. When he attended his father's funeral, he dressed inappropriately and cursed his father by desecrating his altar. He adopted a bit more etiquette after that, but people never forgot that. From that point onward, Nobunaga would see countless rebellions and challenges to his leadership. In 1560, Yoshimoto Imagawa mobilized a force of 40,000 men and headed towards Kyoto. Pressed for time, Nobunaga rallied a force of 3,000 troops and rode to intercept. His general Katsue Shibata understandably did not believe that they could win against such odds.
I don't believe Imagawa has 40,000 men. Perhaps 25,000. What if we do surrender? Will you be satisfied losing your life that way? What if we stay here in this castle and wait until Imagawa loses interest and goes home? We would only prolong the inevitable. We are at a most interesting fate. How I see it, it's a chance of a lifetime, and I cannot afford to miss it. Do you really want to spend your entire lives praying for longevity? We were born to die. Whoever is with me, come to the battlefield tomorrow morning. Whoever is not, stay where you are and watch me win it.
Yoshimoto had heard that Nobunaga was few in number and began celebrating his early victory. Whilst the Imagawa were celebrating, Nobunaga and his troops charged down from a mountain terrain under the cover of a thunderstorm and decimated the Imagawa troops. This victory dispelled most doubt about Nobunaga's capabilities and caught the attention of neighboring lands. The biggest obstacle Nobunaga had to face during that time were the coalitions that rose against him. His biggest opposers were the Asakura, the Takeda, and the Ashikaga. In 1571, Nobunaga wanted to get an upper hand on his enemies by taking Mount Hiei, which was protected by a temple of warrior monks. The monks had been trying to bribe Nobunaga with gold as a peace offering, which only proved to him that the people inside were corrupt and used their pious background to dodge government punishment. So Nobunaga had another plan: burn the temple down with the monks inside, which he did, which killed several thousand women and children along with them. This is the defining moment that earned Nobunaga the title Demon King. Although a controversial decision amongst his retainers, this was regarded as an act against tradition and a crime against humanity. But Nobunaga did not run away from this title. He embraced it, and this greatly affected how his enemies saw him. It was after Shingen, head of the Takeda, died in 1572 that Nobunaga was able to gain momentum against the coalition. He defeated the Asakura and the Azai at the Odani Castle, which caused mutinies within the other clans of the coalition. And living up to his Demon King title, he annihilated the Eiko renegades even after they appealed for surrender. The Oda joined forces with the Tokugawa to deal a heavy blow to the Takeda at Nagashino. This is where Nobunaga revolutionized the use of firearms in Japanese warfare. As the Takeda cavalry, one of the most fierce armies during that period, were decimated by these new tactics. As Nobunaga was establishing Azuchi Castle as his new base of operations in 1567, a second anti-Nobunaga coalition uprose. This time featuring the Matsunaga, the Uesugi, the Takeda, and the Saika. With the help of his friend Hideyoshi, he was able to make the Saika surrender to him. Mitsuhide was able to defeat the Matsunaga, and Katsuie, who was struggling against the Uesugi, was able to come out victorious after Kinshin died of illness. After dividing most of his territory amongst his most trusted retainers, Nobunaga was finally able to subjugate the Takeda, sparing no one who even surrendered.
I shall pardon none who have submitted, as the roots and its offspring shall be exterminated as a whole.
When Nobunaga was resting at Honnoji, Mitsuhide, who was supposed to be reinforcing Hideyoshi in conquering Shikoku, turned his troops around and attacked Nobunaga at Kyoto. And from there onwards, records get a little muddy as to what actually happened at Honnoji. Either Mitsuhide set fire to Nobunaga's temple, or Nobunaga set the flames himself and suffocated and burned to death or committed seppuku. But the most interesting thing about this is that Nobunaga's remains were never found. To this day, they're trying to find some investigative evidence to figure out what actually happened at Honnoji. Or as like the games constantly like to say,
vanished forever in a sea of flame.
So what we can gather from this is that Nobunaga was a very unique individual despite his position of power. He was charismatic, insightful, and was open to new things. He may not have been the most polite or empathetic individual, but he knew how to get the job done. By any means necessary. Does this sound familiar? And you could even argue that the inclusion of Nobunaga in this entire gaming series ever since the start of Nobunaga's ambition was out of the developers' personal admiration for Nobunaga. Because in their eyes, Nobunaga was the only person in the Warring States that was an innovative man ahead of his time. Discarding dated customs, he sought to revolutionize Japan with various techniques. Take a look at Nobunaga's design, his clothing, his visage. He wears knight-like armor and a cape, which is merged with Japanese attire. This is an homage to Nobunaga's tolerance and interest in the Europeans coming to Japan. As stated before, he was into their clothing, which included capes and collars. There's also a very deep aspect into his Demon King concept in earlier games. For instance, he had a motif of black feathers, which may have a double meaning behind them. On one hand, it might be a reference to Lucifer, who was a fallen angel, and fallen angels in fiction usually are depicted as having black wings. And on the other hand, these might be crow feathers, which in Japanese mythology are messengers of heaven, and killing them is said to invoke the god's anger and punishment. And Nobunaga is seen wearing their feathers as a collar. His first two weapons, Onikiri and Kumokiri, are named after the two legendary armaments mentioned in the Tale of Haki, which are connected to Yoshitsune Minamoto from the Heian period. The Hasabe is a sword Nobunaga used to kill one of his servants in a furious rage. The sword would later be passed down to Hideyoshi and then further passed down to the Kuroda family. The Muramasa is named after Japan's most famed swordsmith, and the Orochi is named after the sword from Japanese mythology Orochi no Aramasa, a blade used by Sasano to defeat Yamatano Orochi. There's also his Dairoku Ten, which translates to the Sixth Heaven Demon King, which is a reference to the Buddha's six divisions for the path to rebirth. Heaven, Human, Shira, Gaki, Shikujo, and Hell, which most fictions of Nobunaga depict him following the exact definition of Dairokuden. Given that the title Demon King was meant to slander him, he was said to have liked the nickname. That's why the kanji for his Muso attack is Heaven, and the one for his ultimate attack is Supremacy. All in all, Nobunaga seems to be a complex individual. Although he was strong and charismatic, he was a very hard person to read, and it was very difficult for people to gauge his emotions on certain matters. This is why the games choose to portray him not as a full-on character but a force of nature, paving a new wave of change for Japanese history. And although history remembers him infamously, it's nice to know that Koei Games are giving him more intrigue beyond his title. Now, if you're interested in content like this, may I suggest you guys follow me on Patreon and subscribe to my channel. And why don't you do me the lovely favor of clicking that subscribe button and leaving a comment down below. And if you're interested to see which warrior is up next for analysis, why don't you follow me on my social media, and you might actually learn something ahead of time. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I love you guys so much. Bye-bye.
Boo, motherfucker. Oh, I don't know if I can do the laugh anymore.